Okay.
So well, it's not yet live, but I'll get the link now. Live enough. So yeah, theoretically the fifth. You talk about the fifth movie because if people tune in, then they're going to be like, "Oh, cool."
Well, I think there's two fifth movies, right? There's actually Mad Max 5, which is The Wasteland, and then there's this Furiosa prequel, which it sounds like that's what he's trying to do first.
Unsurprisingly, feels like perhaps he's more interested in Furiosa than Max as a character now.
Oh, 100%.
4 movies later.
I'm just like legitimately worried that a lot of the things that we like about Furiosa were sort of the exigencies of plot and required of the way he structured the story, and that if he gets too into Furiosa's backstory, that's where the sexist stuff will start to come out.
Yeah.
But, you know, prove me wrong, George. Like, please, please prove me wrong.
One thing about George is he is a good collaborator. So,
yeah.
Do you know he had the playwright of the Virgin Monologues did a workshop on Fury Road with the wives?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah.
Yeah.
For those of you who are joining us live on YouTube, we are yet to officially kick off. A couple more tech things as usual, but we should start in a minute or so.
I think I'll get you guys to check it. Is there much background audio coming from me?
Yeah, there's something.
Yeah, I hear a little something, but I guarantee my cat will be worse.
I might need to jump rooms. I'll just have to carry my laptop.
All
right,
Have you changed the link tree?
Yeah. So while you do that, I'm gonna change rooms.
Okay. Cool. All right, and finally the Patreon. Burp, burp, burp.
Is that a sword in Stu's picture?
It is. He does sword fighting.
I think I knew that. Holy cow, I got the Patreon email and everything. This is like full circle for me, guys. This is great. I'm the audience and I'm in the show.
Well, as soon as Stu is back with us, we will kick off.
Sure.
Welcome to people who've joined us. Again, Stu was in too loud a space, so he's just moving his laptop to another room.
Or possibly a different building. Right? You could cut to a good sequence of him trying to find a different place to be right now.
Oh, he's reappeared.
Hey, look, there he is.
Although we lost the PowerPoint or the GIF, Stu, was that on your laptop?
It's coming.
He nods. Yeah.
I nods. I'm in a semi-private studio. So I've got my own private studio, but there's no ceiling. So there's a bit of sound bleed. It's all right. I wasn't expecting anyone to work a Saturday.
Yeah, fair enough.
Gosh. It always feels like a relief when it actually starts. I'm always so like,
How many live episodes have you guys done so far?
Just the 8th.
Yeah.
The 8th. Wow.
Madness.
Do you want me to share the PowerPoint again?
Well, we could just start.
Yeah, guys, it's 7 minutes past the hour here. Let's go.
Oh wait, it's not even playing. I just, I spent a good couple of hours cutting this together. Like, did you see the masking on the opening shot where he comes?
It was terrific.
Thanks. I just want to get acknowledgement. Taz didn't even read the times. I'm assuming he didn't even look at it. He thought we were starting at 11:30. So I'm just making sure he's seen it now.
I've seen it.
Okay, good.
It's very good. It's very good. We're talking about like a precisely 2-hour long movie, so we could have literally just hit start on it and then done like a live commentary.
That would actually keep us to length. We've certainly done episodes that are longer than the films.
So do you want to start or shall I?
I might as well get going.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Stu Willis.
And I'm Chaz Fisher.
And welcome to Draft Zero Live Salation, a podcast and live stream. I was going to say about things that are interesting to screenwriters.
Oh, God.
Where we take a deep dive and try to work out what makes great screenplays work. In this case, we're not just talking about, quote unquote, a screenplay. We're talking about Fury Road and the visual storytelling in Fury Road, which is interesting because we're actually going to look at the screenplay, which is a mixture of storyboards and text. And when we get to it, you'll see. We think it's actually being constructed after the initial story development. And we are joined by Matt Brown, columnist, filmmaker.
Hi, everyone.
Digital product manager and author of the Cinema of Survival series of essays on Mad Max Fury Road. We've loved his work, he loved his podcast and his writing, so he was a great choice to get onto Fury Road when he pumped out a book of how many essays?
It's 12 essays and a foreword, so it's 13 essays. And the worst thing about it was I really thought it would get all the Fury Road out of my system, and it didn't even come close. Like, I've been going through it with my editor for the last few months, and like there are entire categories of ideas that I didn't even address in the book. So someday I'll either write a sequel or I'll just have to like get on as many podcasts as I can to get the rest of it out of me.
So we're going to try and take advantage of the visual medium that we have here on YouTube and actually talk about not just the screenwriting, but also the directing and staging and editing of Fury Road. But we are, rest assured, also going to be talking about things that will be very, very pertinent to just on the page screenwriting. And as a whole, we're talking about visual storytelling, but the things that we're going to try and tackle, like the indiscrete things that George Miller and his co-writers have nailed in terms of visual storytelling, are set up some payoffs. We're going to look at eye scanning, deep staging. We're going to look at the wonderful first fight between Max and Furiosa, and finish on how Max and Furiosa's relationship seems to develop entirely through action and very little dialogue at all.
Yes. And I want to just point out right at the beginning, thanks to the website Cinephilia, they compiled an incredible amount of material, which was very useful for working on this podcast, live stream. And I think there was part of the reason I wanted to do Fury Road is there's this idea that Fury Road is in some ways like a silent film, that for George, I mean, we've heard urban myths, and they're not just urban myths, but, this idea that started as storyboards. So it's a development process that's a little bit unusual, but also I think the intention of the film can play without dialogue is really important. Like, and full caveat, and is it a boast? I don't know. I worked with George. I was production supervisor on Happy Feet 2. So they were in pre-production for Fury Road. But I got exposed to a lot of his ways of thinking about filmmaking. And he would edit without sound because he was like, it needs to work. Scenes need to work purely on a visual level. No dialogue, no music. Everything needs to be conveyed. And I think you can see that perfection in Fury Road. And I think the fact that it also spent like 20 years in development is why it's like this finely tuned machine. You know?
Yeah. And there's also, it feels like, you know, him having that exposure to Happy Feet and the way that animation, storytelling, and quote unquote screenwriting happens sort of hand in glove with storyboarding. So, you know, it goes, you know, script, storyboard, animatic, like back and forth a lot. And it's much more iterative. And so you can see, I think that, should we bring up the script so that people know what we're talking about?
Yeah, because this is wild. I had not seen this before you guys sent it to me, because I mean, when I was writing the book, I was really trying to work with just what ended up on the screen. So I didn't want to look at the script. I didn't want to look at any of the ancillary, like comic books, video games, any of those things. I just was like, what ended up on the screen? So to finally see this thing that, again, like you said, it's almost an urban myth that we've heard this whole movie was not written, but was storyboarded out instead. It was really neat to finally see that. And we don't know if this is really it. But just to see the way this is composed as both a document of images and text is really fascinating.
Yeah, and look, it's certainly a step in the development process. I guess what we don't know is this what they, you know, went into production with? And we know, like, the version that we've got here, there's some differences with the final film, but whether this was the kind of document that they were working with throughout, or whether they went to other documents or not, we don't know. But it is fascinating. And in terms of visual storytelling, like, we're just looking at the first page here, you can see how much less writing, like actual words on the page, you have to do when you've got all these images talking for you. Now, there's obviously only so much that spec screenwriters may be able to get away with in terms of this approach. It would certainly be eye-catching and different. But we are going to try and take lessons without, like, even if you're going for the more traditional word-only way of writing a screenplay. But yeah, as stated, you know, so many of these shots are just go straight into the movie. And, you know, to start off with, what the first way we wanted to get into this topic is how Miller and his co-writers built the world of Fury Road so unapologetically by just throwing all these incredible details at us as viewers without ever bothering to explain them.
Yeah.
So I've got a list of just details that I love that he's bringing in very early on. That
I'm just gonna, I know you're ready to dive into it, and I've got a feeling like we've all got prepared speeches. It's like each other PowerPoints. I just want to, like, let's quickly summarize the film.
Yeah, for those just assuming that everyone loves this film and knows it back to front and has watched it 30 times.
Honestly, if you haven't, I don't respect you anymore, so get the hell off the live stream.
Hang on, I'm just sharing. Okay, cool. So this is the production synopsis. And look, it's an apocalyptic story set in the furthest reaches of the planet, in a stark desert landscape where humanity is broken. Everyone is crazed, fighting for the necessities of life. Within this world exist two rebels on the run who might just be able to restore order. There's Max, a man of action and a man of few words who seeks peace of mind, following the loss of his wife and child in the aftermath of the chaos, which is interesting that in the official production synopsis, they're referencing events of the original Mad Max. Mm-hmm. And Furiosa, a woman of action and a woman who believes her path to survival may be achieved if she can make it across the desert back to her childhood homeland. So, and we have done a previous podcast on this in our main characters versus protagonist episodes, because as we talked about in that episode, Furiosa in many ways is the protagonist of this film, even if Mad Max himself is the titular character. Something else I want to quickly bring up, because this ties into the world building, and it's something we've banged on our Watchmen, our criminally underseen 3-hour.
Great episode.
Criminally underseen episode of the live stream, which is on given circumstances. And what are given circumstances? They're the plot, the facts, the instance, the period, the time and place of the action, and the way of life. The given circumstances are suppositions, products of the imagination. They're what informs the characters. And Matt, you made the observation earlier that what was impressed you about the world building in Fury Road was how much is just shown and is truly just given Like the characters live this world and they don't exposit the world to each other because it is their given circumstances. They don't need to explain the intricacies of their religion around Immortan Joe because they know it. And so it makes the audience kind of put those pieces together. And that's part of what I want to explore, how they do that, you know, and it informs everything. Go on.
Yeah, no, I was going to say it's like in THX 1138 when you see the audience watching the sporting event and you don't see the sporting event and you hear weird sounds and it sounds like it's a giant ping pong match or something like that. But you don't need to see the sporting event because in that world of the future in THX, everyone knows what they're looking at. It would be like us watching baseball. Like it just makes perfect sense. So they don't need to explain it. I see a lot of the same logic here. There's, aside from the opening narration, where he does at least acknowledge that there was the oil war and then there was the water war and the world fell apart. There's no explanation of the rules of how this world works. We only see it. We see that Immortan Joe has built this citadel. We see that he has this army of skull-faced people that are all bald and all have, you know, mutant growths on their necks. Like we see all of that, but nobody explains what a war boy is. No one even explains that war boys are all suicidal zealots. We see it because Slit and Nux do it, you know, 20 minutes later. And that's the strategy throughout. And I just think it's, I mean, we were saying before we recorded that it can throw you out of the movie. If that's the kind of thing that will get you hung up, it could throw you out of the movie. But if you're just willing to go with it and sort of willing to invest the story yourself with what you think all of that means and what it says for the characters, it can be very powerful.
Yeah. I mean, so I had a somewhat unique viewing experience this time around. I've seen it quite a few times now, and I saw it with my wife who has seen the movie before, but she is a wonderful life partner for me because she instantly forgets movies. So we can rewatch them as many times as we like, and she's still surprised. So she was asking a ton of questions in the opening part of the movie about the world. She's like, what, is everyone sick? Is this a nuclear holocaust? What's going on here? And that demonstrates to me that she was in some way not like asking questions that rather than being fully invested in the movie, but that was only in the first sort of 10, 15 minutes, rather than, you know, once you got through that opening world building, she just gave up to the relentlessness of it. But one of the things that I would like to focus on, so I mean, you have a broad choice whether you can be as ballsy as George Miller, and to put this in context, it's the fourth installment of a franchise, right? So he has a lot of given circumstances given to him, you know, certainly in terms of the aesthetic. But there's a lot in this movie that wasn't in any of the previous three, certainly around disease and food control and the statuses and strata of the different of this society. So I just want to pull up two different instances where he's given details to us and how he's chosen to put them in the script. So I'm just going to contrast. I'm going to share the document that we have. And again, full disclosure, it might not be the final document, but it is what we're working with. Oh, Stu, I think you're on mute.
I am. So I think it's worth pointing out that I think this document is compiled from concept art and storyboards that they've had, and they've added the material because it sounds like what they did is effectively had multiple storyboard artists working on different sections like an animation, and then they've taken those frames and those concept arts and then interspersed them with the script, which is, I actually think, really effective. But
I mean, you can see it's a hugely compelling document, much more compelling than any other screenplay. And it also, you know, it saves you. You know, here's the first description of the War Boys, going back to, so where are we? Yeah, page 2. So several youths, War Boys, struggle to keep him down. There is no description of the fact that they all have lumps on them, that they're all incredibly pale, that they're all got shaved heads, that they've all got skull tattoos on their face. He doesn't need to do that because he's got the storyboards here to show us what those war boys are. He doesn't, you know, beyond youths, he doesn't need to say how young they are and all their zealotry and their madness and things like that. So I want to contrast that with later when Immortan Joe, who again, like with his back, we see his scarred cancerous back, and none of that is explained. Is he ill? Is everyone ill in this world? They go, but when he walks through, he's got a human dairy. And one of the observations we made in our pre-chat, Stu, you actually said that even though there's a lot of heavy lifting being done with the storyboards and the visuals here, the writing that is there is incredibly well done. It's not to take away. It's not that they've just gone, we don't need to write this shit.
Yeah.
So
no, it's a really good point. It's really compellingly written. The prose is really good, and that I always when I read screenplays, I always think that might be something that writers forget, which is it's more than just making the dialogue sound good and true. That's great, but like the way you go about writing the non-dialogue, the prose aspects of the script, can help sell the script because you're conveying the tone that way, right? And this is tonally beautiful as a piece of writing.
Yeah. So and
performance, it's actually writing in a lot of the not that one, but we'll see later on. We'll get Chaz to find an example of like particularly Mad Max's what his internal motivations and his internal monologue is. They're actually writing that in because that's not easily communicated in storyboards. So I think they're actually using the text to communicate things that aren't being communicated visually, like tone. I mean, boards have tone, but not like I think the line you're gonna be talking about the gruel line.
Yeah.
Sure.
Exactly. So the War Boys, barely any description, all done in storyboards. But when he walks through the human dairy, it's described. We've got these beautiful visuals here in the storyboards, but the description, the word description is fantastic as well. He passes through the milk shed where fattened women are turning cockroach gruel into milk. A-grade human filtered. Their breast pumps are powered by skinny men chained to exercise bikes. I do not need the storyboards there for that to be fully visualized in my head.
Yeah.
And this is one of the few details that George has thrown at us in this world building that seems to not actually have a plot payoff later on. It is purely like, this is women's role in this world. This is, wonderfully, it's almost like a body horror thing to get like a visceral reaction from the audience. This is how Immortan Joe sees and treats women. So it is pure world building, but almost every other visual detail that we could talk about, like in terms of the cancers, the cars, the spray paint that the War Boys do on their mouths when they're about to do some kind of suicidal activity, the chastity belts, everything else seems to have a plot payoff later on. So that was all I wanted to do, because I mean, often when we're starting out scripts, the balancing act in that first act, when you're establishing what the rules of the world are and building your world, whether you're in a present day or in this post-apocalyptic world, is to go, how much detail do we have to give, because we don't have all the visuals and the music and the performances giving it to us. So obviously Miller's got that opportunity here with storyboards to add another layer of world building to us that isn't available just through the words. But it's a constant battle of, I can't write a novel here. I can't write what it smells like, what it feels like, everything else. So it's about those choices about what details to give. And this screenplay is still being sparing in its details, despite being unapologetically throwing them at you without explaining them.
Yeah. And one of my old film school professors would say that, there's something in a film called an image system, and it's not even fully developed here, but like you say that the mother's milk doesn't necessarily have a plot payoff later, but it does have a thematic payoff, because the whole movie is obsessed with fluids, right? It's about the control of water. It's about the control of gasoline. It's about the control of Max's blood, literally, and how that fuels parts of the story, which we'll kind of get into later. And then on top of that, he also just layers in breast milk, because he's like, why not? We're here, right? Like, we have all of these other fluids that are literally the economy of this world that Joe has built. So why wouldn't we also have breast milk as be part of that?
Yeah. So you've muted yourself again.
Yeah.
This is a good strategy. This keeps him quiet.
Are you sure it's me muting it and Chaz doesn't have a remote mute button? How I can talk until interrupted. What do you think is the image system beyond fluids?
No, I think that is I think he made a conscious decision to have fluids recur in different ways throughout the story to support pieces of the story that were important. Obviously, I think the most important one is the blood thing with Max, and the fact that he goes from being a completely involuntary blood donor to a completely voluntary blood donor at the end. I think that's very powerful. But he's made 3 films where the most important fluid in the world is gasoline. He's now said we're moving away from gasoline. It still plays a part in the story, but he's moving away from it. Now it's water, because he's made the Happy Feet movies and he's become obsessed with the destruction of the planet by way of, losing control of our water. And so he's just layering all of these images into the story in different ways, and they all kind of move around like fluids. Like the green place has turned into a swamp. It has become a subsumed, muddy environment. If you watch the film on those terms, you see that the concept of liquid, just as an image, liquid, comes back over and over and over again.
And the different colors of liquid. There was an earlier version. I bought the art of Mad Max for this podcast. It was a good justification to get it.
Fantastic.
So Immortan Joe was originally going to be painted blue, and I've got it here, right? High tech we are here, right?
Oh,
so that's the early concept art for Immortan Joe as blue, and part of the trading system was going to be people giving him detergent and paint to make himself continue to be blue. All right, that was going to be part of the economy. So that connects to your
absolutely
thing.
Yeah.
In terms of the early visual setup, Chaz, I think there's a few observations we can kind of continue on. One, I definitely want to briefly touch on, because it's the kind of thing that I would consider including in supplementary material. So I think this episode is really interesting to come after the episode we just did with Mark on pitch decks and supplementary material that you give with a script, because you could potentially get choose to have little bits of concept art in a script. I think we're getting to that point where that might become, it's certainly becoming technically possible in terms of both Final Draft and Fade In now support images, embedded images. And I think you'll probably get away with it. So one of the most important kind of recurring symbols is Immortan Joe's fiery steering wheel, right? Mm-hmm. So that logo we see branded everywhere. So here's some of the early development that they did on it, right? And it sounds like they did like 100 and something, well, no, not 100, maybe 50 different designs, but they're all kind of motifs. But what was important for George, and this is like a directorial thing, but it's good to appreciate the mindset, was that it had to work as a branding and it had to work on the back of vehicles. It had to work like anywhere they can put it. So he wanted to kind of like strip it back and simplify it. But that symbol reoccurs everywhere, and it brands things. It serves a story purpose. It brands things as Immortan Joe's property. And we literally see it as that fiery brand on Max. It's a visual storytelling that's establishing the breadth of the empire of Immortan Joe, and his status as a demigod. And of course, I love the fact that it relates to the steering wheel. And then you've got that kind of like spiritual, like the shrine of, I was going to say it's the shrine to the V8s, but it's just the shrine of steering wheels where they go and take it. All the aspects of those religion that we're learning, and we only learn it visually, is awesome. And the thing is, what he's very clever about, and this does try to set up and pay off, so maybe we can transition that, unless there's anything else we want to do about that.
Well, in terms of the ultimate payoff, is the final culminating shot of the action sequence of the movie. Is that's his steering wheel, his actual steering wheel, flying out of the carnage at the screen.
Yeah. And it is neat that the steering wheel does serve as the brand, does serve as the only real visual clue we have to the ritualistic aspects of the warboy culture that Immortan Joe has apparently built up in the Citadel. Like, these things are connected, but again, George Miller never tells us how they're connected or how these pieces work. We just see them in operation. We see them through Nux. We see, the first time we see Furiosa, we start tight in on the brand on the back of her neck, and then we pull out. We've seen Max get the brand before. We've seen, Nux and Slit literally fighting over their wheel. So there's this weird talismanic aspect to steering wheels in this world, because of course there is. It's a car culture. It's like NASCAR gone crazy. So yeah, and then it literally at the end of this orgy of violence in the final act of the movie, the last thing you see is the steering wheel blacking out the camera, and that's the end of that. And that's the last time you see that. It's over.
It signifies the end of. Here we go.
There you go.
Hopefully don't get cut off. Terrified. Oh, mate, I might have to just fast forward a little bit. Oh, come on. It's like I should have screenshot it. There we go.
Yeah, look at that thing.
and as you say, it signifies the end of the act. It signifies the end of the empire. And I think what is really interesting is how sequence-driven Fury Road is. It's very like here's the chunk, and it definitely, to me, again, reminds me of animation, of breaking things into reels or sequences and working on that section, and very cleverly uses plot elements to kind of tie them together, like stitch them together so they feel part of the coherent whole. But there's definitely like, oh, here's the return to the back. Here's the,
Yeah. But also because the movie is so intense, I think that strategy also really works for giving the audience a break, right? Like after the fire tornado scene, if you don't have a fade to black and like a moment of kind of stillness and quiet, I think your entire audience would go crazy. Like that's the 30-minute movie of the movie, and they've seen a lot of stuff up to that. You need to take a breath there. And it's the same thing with the end when the car is crashed. We've seen this entire experience of the final battle, and then there's just a moment there, and then we have the sequence in the truck with Furiosa getting the blood, and they return to the Citadel. So it's a good way to vary the tones, like, because otherwise it could just be, and you kind of get the sense that Miller would be happy if it was just a non-stop chase from start to finish, but the audience would just be exhausted.
Yeah. So in terms of, we had 3 details that we had flagged in our pre-discussion about. They felt like throwaway details that Miller doesn't bother to explain. That's just world building that then actually turn into massive plot points later on. One is the John Howard character. He's the head of the oil refinery town. And he's got this enormous cancerous foot that just in what feels like a throwaway shot, someone is like tending to it, like draining it of fluids. Again, more disgusting fluid references. But in the end, it becomes super important for Max to use this guy's dead weight foot to drive a vehicle by itself. Yeah. One of the most beautiful beats in the whole script is, we see all these people with cancers on them, and none of it is explained, like who is cancerous, who is not. Like there is definitely a hierarchy. Like Max's back at the very beginning is tattooed with no lumps, no bumps. The breeding women are selected based on not being sick and being pristine and all that kind of stuff. Even a cut on her leg compromises her value. But then Nux has this speech later on about Larry and Barry before they choke him off, and he's got tattoos on his cancers that are going to choke off his windpipe and kill him. And it gives you insight into why it's quite late into this. It's almost halfway through the movie, but it suddenly explains, oh, this is why young kids in this world are attracted to the war boy life, that they are attracted to the idea of this suicide for an afterlife, that they are easily radicalized because their lifespan has been so shortened, and that it has to find meaning in it.
Exactly. And Nux is a character that I mean, Nux is my favorite character in the movie. And because he could be such a grotesque character. And, when we first meet him, he's a fanatic, and he's very thoughtless. Like he doesn't seem to have any sort of dimensionality around what he's doing. But I really think that scene, that moment there where the way he talks about his tumors, that he's given them names, that he's drawn happy faces on them with tattoo ink, that tells you something about this guy. And you realize, like, holy shit, this guy's just a kid. Like he is a child, he's in an adult male body, but like he's so young and so naive. And from that moment, I can forgive him a lot of the behavior up to then and enjoy the fact that he becomes a more thoughtful man. And by the end, he's obviously willing to sacrifice himself essentially to save everybody. And he does it without even a moment's hesitation. At the end of the movie, when it's time for someone to stay behind and crash the rig so that the others can escape, he doesn't gnash his teeth or like it. And it's the same thing that happens with Max. This thing that was conferred on him in the first act, which he's going to be a suicide bomber for this cause that isn't really his cause. he then gives voluntarily at the end.
Yeah.
He's going to become a suicide bomber to save his friends.
Yeah. And you've already mentioned it, but Max's transition from being a blood bag involuntarily to being a voluntary blood bag is, again, one of these visual details that is world building early on, but becomes a hugely important plot and character beat. So, I mean, I don't know.
And they do something very important with design, which is under his, I guess, lapel, like his military jacket, he's still got the tubes. And so whenever you shoot to a close up of him, you actually still in that the tube that is connected to him is he's still get, and he could have thrown it away because it's not in him, but he is a scavenger. So he's like, a plastic tube going to be useful. I could use it to siphon gasoline or something. And you don't even question that he's held onto it because it just makes sense. But he could have put it in a pocket. Instead, they've chosen to put it up near his head. So it's just constantly there as a visual indicator. And that's the kind of thing that if you wrote into the script, it's going to be hard to remind the audience that it's there. You're going to have to be like, by the way, he's still got the tube in this shot. Whereas in a storyboard, you know that when you're going to cut to that person, that you're going to see it. And we've had the similar script, without going into detail, Chaz and I have had that problem. We're having to work out when we remind the audience that the character is, because it's like post-COVID, one of the characters is like a little bit obsessed about wearing their face mask, and it's reminding the audience appropriately that is something that is in the given circumstances of this world, because it's not necessarily something that is, well, it's becoming more commonplace in Melbourne because it's compulsory.
But it's about, for us, it's a detail about building the world, because 3 years post-COVID, is this strange yet? So we're having to educate the audience as to how people feel about face masks in this fictional world that we're doing. And so we're having to, almost do face mask passes of our script. So it's like, who's in favor, who's against, who's wearing them, who's not, like, how do they feel about them, who has them just in case of emergencies, that kind of thing. And that's the kind of world building challenges that we have, that George has gotten around by using storyboards. But I think in the absence of storyboards, he would probably have to write, like, in the absence of storyboards and 3 preceding films, he would probably have to write in a few lines just for the reader, just about this is how the world works.
It's that question of keeping something alive so that you can use it later, right? Like, you just, like, I finished a draft of a script in the spring, and I did one of those things where there's a physical object that is going to have a different use at the end of the movie than you think it's for. And I had to come up with ways, like every 20 minutes in the script, to just have it come up again so that the reader was aware this is still there. It's not a surprise for the last 10 minutes of the film. It's been there the whole time. It doesn't do what you think it does. And yeah, the tube is a perfect example of that, because it's in every shot of him. It's actually on, I don't mean to get too mythic, it's on his right shoulder. It's the angel on his right shoulder. And then at the end, he's gonna use it to save his friend.
I think you're allowed to get mythic, given
with
that
this.
That is what this is.
Yeah.
2 more things of observation about the world building that I thought was very clever, and I can't find them in the film, so I'm just going to hold up the book, and they also won't stop us streaming. There's the use of the text. So that's the shot when Immortan Joe comes into the room with his brides and is like, there is the text saying, "Who killed the world?" And then there is, what's her name? Giddy?
Yeah.
We are not things. And incorporating that kind of environmental storytelling, which is a term from video games, into this world. And you can tell, like, because George was like made a Mad Max video game, and he was really into video games and the narrative aspects to them, that you can see that he's incorporated some of those lessons, right, into how he's kind of set up the world. But I would like to transition into set up some payoffs, because there's one, because we touched on the Night blog, that I actually realized is very clever. And it actually pinged for me later. Again, this is the 2+2 thing, right? That the film presents us one element and then it presents us another element and makes us jump to conclusions, right? Which is in the bog. So what we learn, obviously, is the green place is the bog. But you know what the biggest clue, I think, is the biggest clue for that? There's a couple of really cool elements to it. So let me just... Right. One, it buttons the whole night bog sequence with this shot, which is really interesting. I mean, other than making it feel like maybe Fury Road is a prequel for Dark Crystal. It's interesting because the staging of this shot, just from a visual perspective, because we haven't yet talked about the center framing in Fury Road, but it opens as on a wide as a clean shot. And then, so this is the focus here. And then we're a little bit like, and this shot lingers, and then the war rig draws in and this crow draws in. But what's important, I think, is we've got this whole set piece that feels like a bit of a Deus Ex Machina, is that there's some trees, that there's these just a couple of shots of dead trees. There's this shot, which is great, actually, the off-screen storytelling of just the light. But this fact that there's this just single dead tree in this plane, right? Sorry, this is a different bit of visual storytelling. So I think that tree serves as setup. So when they go, oh, you must have passed through it, and then they make that reference to the crows, which is just this single panel, and this is such a comic book panel, but it makes us go, oh fuck, that was the green place, and that is it. And so that is a little bit of exposition from the women. They've got another name,
the Vuvellini.
Yeah.
But
it's also there's another great setup beat earlier, because I think it's Nux doesn't even know what a tree is called.
Yeah, he says that thing.
Right. So that supports the idea that they could have driven right. They don't even know what they're looking for. Right. I mean, Furiosa obviously does, because she was born there, but everyone else wouldn't even necessarily know the green place if they found it. They don't know what a tree is, like that's a beautiful little beat to set that up.
Because the visual hierarchy of the Citadel is such that there is green on the Citadel that we as the audience are privileged to see because of the high angled shots, but because effectively it's a strata system that those on the bottom will never see the top. They've probably never seen the green, right? Yeah, exactly. At the Citadel. And so that idea that it's only the wives that kind of mention the fact that there's green in the Citadel. I mean, I wonder if Furiosa's ever seen it. So that idea that maybe the Citadel is actually their hope and all they have to do is reclaim it doesn't actually occur to them until Max mentions it later on. So you've got that as the setup and payoff. We've talked about the foot. We've talked about the blood bag. Was there any others that we thought were particularly? I mean, the film is full of great little setup and payoff, like the little bit with the knife in the gear stick.
In the gear stick, yeah.
I mean, there's almost the reason why I picked up the human dairy is it seems to be the only detail that I can think of that really struck me in the world building that didn't have a plot payoff later. So it's the exception rather than the norm.
But it is a world building thing. From my understanding, it's about the commoditization of women. That's kind of
100%. I mean, there is somewhat of a payoff later in that Max, when he comes back covered in other people's blood, in that crow sequence, is washing himself with something, and he asks what it is, and they tell him it's milk because he doesn't even know what it is. But that is not really, like, it could have been water. It didn't have to be milk. It did, but anyway. So
okay, so I'm gonna talk about a setup and payoff and set up for something that hopefully we'll get time to do. That the other one I was thinking of was Furiosa's competence with the sniper rifle. So we actually see her using it to shoot people, and then they have a setup where they're like, oh, there's only 4 bullets or whatever, and then Max takes a couple of shots at what's his name, the bullet farm guy with the wig of bullets.
That guy,
and he misses, and they got one shot, and then Furiosa comes behind him. And it's that moment of he has to trust her to give him that gun. But it works because we've set up, the audience know that she's a good shot. And we know that they've only got 4 bullets. And therefore he's got no other choice. And he does that great, and passes it to her. And of course she hits. But that's a great little setup and payoff. But it also, what I'm setting up is that when we talk about how Max and Furiosa's relationship develops. But what I want to go to now, if we can, is the first Max Furiosa. Well, it's their only fight. It's their kind of when they come at loggerheads. Briefly before I'm going to do a brief little. I'm going to hopefully not get too lecture mode, but I want to talk a little bit about iScan. But I want to come back to our previous discussion we had about Max not being the protagonist because he doesn't make the first choice. That's Furiosa. When she very much veers off the road, which is, you observe, Matt. That's it is the shot in the storyboards, right?
Yeah, it's exactly the same shot in the storyboards. It's clear, it's as inciting an incident as you're ever going to get in a movie. She literally turns the plot left with the truck. it's beautifully done. I don't actually agree on the Max not being the protagonist. Furiosa is. I think Furiosa, like you've been saying, activates Max. She basically enables the story to go along, which is not to weaken her as a character because she has all the agency. But yeah, like that moment where she drives off, there it is.
Yeah,
exactly the same in the storyboard.
Yeah, she turns off the main road. I mean, that's the equivalent of there's a great little video essay of looking left, looking right. But okay, look, let's touch on it. If I'm happy to touch on it, if you disagree with this, that's always fun.
Well, so I do, because my main thing about Furiosa, she's actually the only character in the movie that does not undergo a change, doesn't learn anything, doesn't become a different person. She's the same person from the moment we meet her to the end of the film. She has an exact idea of what she wants to do. She knows how she wants to do it. She might change her approach to it at various points, most notably when she literally turns around and goes back the way she came. But she does not have an arc, whereas Max actually does, right? Max goes through this process of deciding whether or not he's going to trust other people again, and basically put the trauma. It's really interesting. Like, Max's trauma in this movie is not the one we know him for. It's not his son and his wife. It's this other apparent child who is a girl now. It's not his son. It is this little girl that keeps occurring to him over and over again. He's obviously gone through something between the last movie and now that we haven't seen, but he has to reconcile his unwillingness to be around people and basically be like, no, I can help these guys get to where they want to go. So he's got an arc. Nux has an arc. Obviously the Dag has an arc. Furiosa, on the other hand, is really just, sorry, no pun intended, the engine of all this, right? She's the thing that drives everyone else. Yeah, absolutely. She's the thing that drives the entire story both forward and then at the end turns it back and heads it back the other way. Yeah. That's my take on the Furiosa protagonist crisis.
Well, we actually have the same take. We're just using different language, because the point that we were making is that often people say the protagonist of your movie has to have an arc, right? Like in the hero's journey and all these gurus, they're all like, here's your protagonist. And what we were making the point in that episode where we looked at Mad Max specifically is that what they've done is split the character functions. You have Furiosa, who is driving the plot, and you have Max, who is supplying point of view and emotional change, and Nux as well to that extent, right? But they have very rare opportunities in the script to actually affect the plot. Even the key thing that Max does, which is go to Furiosa and say, don't drive across the salt, turn around, let's go for the Citadel. He is giving that choice to Furiosa.
Yeah. No, that's what I mean when I say Furiosa has all the agency in the story, and Max and Nux have almost none. Their choices are basically go along with these women, or we're going to throw you out of the truck. And rightly so. But so Furiosa has the entire ability to operate change within the story, and that's what I think. That is why people find her so powerful, because we never see that. We've never seen a female character who has that level of control over the unfolding of the narrative in this kind of film.
Even Ripley, which is the kind of the
prototype.
Icon's the wrong word. Like the prototype. This kind of character. She also is deprived. She's deprived of agency until later in the film. She's more like Mad Max, right? Yeah. As in that she tries to quarantine the guys, and then what's his name?
Ash. Yeah.
Ash lets him in and all that stuff. So it is interesting that Furiosa is given so much more of that power. But I think part of what it is, and look, I don't want to get into it's technical stuff that is only useful in terms of diagnosing stories, is that maybe Max is a little bit more of a protagonist in the middle. She kicks off the story, but he takes over the kind of a little bit more of the second act, particularly at least the first half of the second act, because this is what I mean by activated. He has literally changed, to the front, dragged into this fight by Nux, but then he makes the decision to try and escape, which we knew was going to happen, but his decision to try and escape and fight on the back of the vehicle makes him encounter Furiosa. He actually is he's like a wooden clog being thrown into a machine, a sabot, if you will.
Very nice.
I'm referencing a sabot.
Star Trek 6. That's right.
He's a saboteur, and he kind of derails Furiosa's plans a little bit at that point. And that means, that's what I mean by activated, is even if he's necessarily not making the choice that's driving the very story from the beginning, they're still making him do something that then changes the course of her actions. The film would, if he didn't get involved at the beginning of the second act, it probably would have ended up differently. It's possible that they would have died in the canyon if they didn't have him to help, and they certainly possibly would have died in the bog. They needed him, but his activation makes him an active character. But it's just interesting that, and they've obviously also chosen to open the film with him being pursued, et cetera, so it feels like he's got a little bit of agency. Because if it just opened with him being and you could have, there's a version that opened with Furiosa and Mad Max is just there. They needed to see him get caught.
He's definitely the point of view character, and that's how they set that up. Like, we are experiencing this world much more from Max's perspective than we are from Furiosa's. Like, we have less insight into her and less moments of introspection and viewing it what's happening from her point of view than we do from Max. But we've talked about activating Max. Let's look at the first scene where Max actually has agency.
That's right. He kind of has agency. He's still chained to a door. He's still got a garden spade on his face. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to do a quick, before we do that, I'm going to do a quick.
He's gone. We lost him.
Yeah. That was
whatever
a great setup.
That's
he
right.
Broke it.
That's right. Whatever he was going to do, it was too quick. Too quick for us.
I'm wondering whether we should tell him. He might not even know that he's.
You think he's still just going?
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah, maybe text him.
Well, I might just call him.
Yeah.
Because he might be running back to the other room as we speak to fix. You've been kicked off the Zoom.
All right.
So I don't know if you're still talking, but you're not here in the live stream.
Okay. Hilarious.
I miss you.
So join the meeting again, buddy.
Oh, that's great.
Technology.
Oh, we're all getting better at this stuff, but I don't think any of us will ever be great at it. Do you think this stuff ever happened to Captain Picard and Commander Riker? Like,
oh, that would be so hilarious. Like, our bandwidth dropped out.
Yeah, exactly. I think about that a lot. Like, why don't we ever see them texting? It's like 4:00 in the morning and Worf's texting Riker. He's like, hey, man, what's going on?
So Stu's back with us. Hello.
So weird.
Welcome back.
It thinks I'm logged into another meeting.
It was so hilarious, the transition, because you're like, I'm just going to do this quick thing. And then,
God.
Visual storytelling. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a great video essay on the center framing in Mad Max. Did that come through when I talked?
No, that might have broke it.
So essentially, and we'll put a link in the show notes because we're not just going to play someone else's 5-minute video on here. But most of the action in the key points of the action are lined up in a very kind of like this very small area in the middle of the frame. And the idea was that allows them to cut faster because your eye doesn't have to glance around the frame to read the information, right? So this is a theory of eye scan, which I first heard working with George and Happy Feet, because they're very, Mad Max is 2,000 cuts or something, 2,500. Happy Feet 1 is like 800 and Happy Feet 2 was a similar amount. And it's all about how your eye moves across the frame. So I'm not going to go hugely in detail. I actually give I need to make myself a co-host.
Yeah,
but it's worth, while you're doing that, it's worth saying for, I know this is a screenwriting podcast, fellas, but like, it's worth saying that from like a camera composition point of view, pointing everything in the center of your frame all the time is a major faux pas. Right? That's not generally how photographers believe that they arrive at nice looking images. Now, they did it here. I don't think there's a frame in Mad Max Fury Road that I couldn't print out and hang on my wall. But like, it is not the way it is normally done. This decision by George Miller and by Margaret Sixel to do this, to again, be able to cut faster and not have people lose key beats by scanning the frame, it would have been controversial for just about anyone to try it. And here it works perfectly. You don't even notice it till it gets pointed out to you.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, it's more important than the 180 rule, which we'll talk about briefly. So I'm going to quickly skim over it because I literally give like an hour and a half lecture on this. So essentially, part of it is the idea that this is kind of eye scan in action, that you've got lines in a composition. So this creates a little triangle here. And so your eye will tend to look in the West. We read images generally left to right because that's how our language is written. So our composition tends to work left to right, and we start at the top left and work the way right. So this image you'd probably tend to read like left, right, down, right? That's kind of how iScan works. Same here, left to the right, though you might look at him first depending on where focus is and the brightness, but I think you tend to look to the left here because it's the brighter character in the frame, even though the one bottom right is larger. Okay, and then, sorry, there's this other stuff here to do with like silhouettes and axes, and we don't need to know this stuff. And then they've got what they call tracking, which is the movement of the object within the frame, right? And then objects create lines by the way they move, and you can kind of look at silhouettes as part of that. And what's interesting about Mad Max is how graphic the compositions are, and I certainly think that's because they use storyboard artists, but they specifically, Brendan McCarthy is a comic book artist, right? And so that idea of working with images that can be deciphered in silhouettes is really important because that is what you do as a storyboard artist. And it's unsurprising that the film works so well from what I've watched in the black and the chrome version, because so much of it is silhouettes, right? And that the color scheme is very muted. Focus. All right. And so you get this idea. So Bruce Block calls it affinity and contrast, but I think it's a really useful, which is the idea that affinity means that things that are sympathetic to each other and contrast is differences. So you got a lot of affinity of direction, and then you got contrast of direction here, right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. So you get like, here's all kind of combination. So you get to this idea of this is how objects can move within the frame. They can move left and right, up and down, or in diagonals. And diagonals are the most intense version in quoting Bruce Block's language because they're combining multiple axes. Right. And this is very interesting when you watch Mad Max in terms of the staging, how much stuff is diagonal and also how much stuff is, because they originally wanted to shoot a Fury Road in 3D towards and away from the camera because it's got a lot of depth. It creates intensity. And so this all ties to where does the audience look? So movement is, people will tend to look where there's movement. iScan is, related to visual hierarchy. So we look at the circle first, and then we kind of notice that grouping. So here is something with scale. This shot as a composition has got a lot of eye scan. If this was a conversation of two people talking, our eye is going to ping pong, particularly on a big cinema screen, left to right. Whereas if you bring the action closer together, you've got less eye scan. So that's the idea of center composition, right? And then you just have an affinity of movement, which is less of an issue with, which is why I'm skipping over it with Mad Max, because they will tend to have everything center frame. So your eye is not really moving. But a good example of this in a cut, right, is something that is a legal cut in theory, but will feel like it pops, is a shot like this from the wide to the close-up, where they're popping the frame. This technically is still the 180 rule. So if the axis is here, we're still in front and we're still on the right side of the character. So this does not break the 180 rule, but that's going to feel a lot less poppy to the audience than a shot down like this over here, right? Whereas we frame it like this, and that's because they're effectively using the same position. And so you can plan this in storyboards, and part of what storyboarding is, particularly in animation, is controlling where the audience looks and thinking about that over frames. This is my kind of summary of some of the stuff I learned from George and the others. It does relate to the fight scene because the fight scene gets a lot centered, but what is really interesting is the way of how strong the geography is in the Nux, not the Nux. Well, Nux gets
Nux is involved. Yeah.
The Furiosa. And just before I jump into that, I just want to show this piece of concept art from the book because I am probably going to get prepared way too much, which you guys probably have to interject before I get too boring. This is the scene where we're going to look at. This is Mark Sexton's boards, and like how similar they are. And this image of the wives is one of the early pieces of concept art. I love it, how much the male gaze is in this early incarnation from like 2000, particularly from a comic book artist. There is so much nudity in the original boards. So it's the scene just after the toxic storm. Hopefully this works out okay because I have... what?
Has Stu lost all his screenshots?
Oh, wow. Yeah, no. Yes, no. I looked in the wrong folder. I've literally exported out like 15 videos. So I'm trying to see if I can load them up into a playlist, which is something I should have done before. But we'll see how we go. Bear with me. Delete all. Yes. Okay. Cool. And our apologies if this gets cut off. All right. It shouldn't. There should be no audio. And cool. I think this is going to work.
Famous
All right.
last words.
So the fight scene's really in 3 sections, right? And that's important both in terms of the setup and the payoff and the character evolution. And so it opens with, and I'll break this down. It opens with the sequence where the road warrior wakes up after the toxic storm, deals with Mux, realizes he has a problem, which is still chained to Nux. And so this is all the setup. And what is really cool, by the way, I'm not going to flip to it because I didn't put it in the presentation. This shot of him is the sunbathe, the famous Australian photograph. I love that they kind of referencing it. And so you can see the boards through here. He kind of wakes up, erupts into consciousness. That's one line. I love the erupt, but the way they do this in the film is excellent. Okay, so there's something really cool that's just happened here, right? Which you can't even, I'm just going to play it again because this is at normal tempo. And this is what I mean about writing unfilmables. They've actually got these flash cuts of just stuff that they've used.
Yeah, volcanic eruptions. Like he took it literally.
Yeah, look at that.
Yep.
Right? And it reminds me of Chris Cunningham's work in he took it literally. But what is and then that little shot of him, his face. So the point is you can write stuff. This is the whole you can't write stuff that can't be filmed. Man, there's a lot of ways you can film stuff. And that kind of motion and stuff like that. And I'm just slowing it down because you just feel it. That kind of like shock into consciousness you feel. And this film is so visceral. You know.
Oh, and I just noticed that shot's him being forced underwater at the beginning. It's just been regraded red instead of blue.
Yeah, so it feels like
fantastic work.
You know, it's just nuts, and it's probably something they discovered in the editing. All right, so this then breeds us. Wait, did I? Okay, I just played it. Okay, so that leads us into this section where he realizes he's still chained to the pursuit car. So this is really important setup for the fight that we're going to see, right? So I'm playing this at double tempo. That's why it looks weird. So he pulls it out, comes in there, and I love that shot of the hand, right? Look how much it closely marries to the storyboard, but also this shot doesn't just see him approaching it. We're seeing it's connected and how much it's chained to him, right? Pulls him out, gets the shotgun's the next beat. So that's the first beat, right? And then we go to the next beat. So this is all broken into very clear beats. Gets the shotgun. They've changed it. So in the storyboards, he actually loaded the gun. They've not bothered to this. Gets it. I love this bit of storytelling, like how he points it at the wrist. We know what he's going to do. He doesn't have to have dialogue. In a Marvel film or something like that, they'd probably find some way, reason for him to kind of explain what's going on, you know. And then this bit of storytelling, which is probably, I think, a little bit of a reaction shot, which is important. Like, so we know that he's like prepared to do this. I think could be SFX to do that.
Yep.
Fuck. Okay. Doesn't work. They've sold it with the gesture. And then he's prepared.
And what's amazing is, I don't know if you guys remember this, but like when I saw it in the theaters, the audiences would always be reacting there. They don't want to see Mad Max blow this kid's hand off to get free. And they fully believe he's going to do it too, right? So it's like to not having to explain anything, right? Nothing has been stated. Everyone knows exactly what's about to happen. And then it starts to become giggles as he's trying to bite Nux's thumb off.
Yeah, but it is like this shocking moment, and they've used coincidence to get the character. It feels like a coincidence because you go, oh man, it's saving him from doing something depraved, but that's actually a setup, right? Because then we get into the second beat, which is this great shot of the war rig coming into focus, which they describe. It's like seeing a ship at sea.
Yeah.
Right. And you can kind of just see it kind of coming in out of the fog and him making that decision, right? Like that's all in the writing and it's really well translated. Okay. And then we cut to, and that's interesting. This kind of like cut to the wide shot here, which is definitely at the war rig. I mean, look at that, how close the board, let me hit play. The board is to that shot, right?
Yeah.
So it's definitely marking a transition, like a clear point of change. And what's interesting about the script is they're using these kind of 1980s slug lines throughout. It's like at the war rig the Road Warrior approaches. They're using that kind of like, it's very in the 80s. Like you read the Die Hard script and it'd be like, John McClane in bold letters, and then other stuff. And it kind of come out of fashion, but it makes sense for this.
That's still how I write. I write exactly like that. We're here. We're there. This is happening.
Well, we've in the scripts you and I are writing, just by the fact that like the whole big climax of the script happens in a single location, but in different parts within that location. It's in a field and there's different characters. So we are doing things like this, like with this character, with that
you have to do stuff like that on Jim, on Becky, on this, on that. Yeah, like that's just how you frame it.
Exactly. Speaking of framing, look at this beauty of this frame, the frame within the frame, but again, the center focus, right? And there's this great beat here, and I want to read it out because it's as he comes to the vehicle, things are looking pressed against the back of the rig. He is coughing in a splash of water. Things are looking up. If this vehicle is functioning and he can get control of it well, he grasps Snuck's gun just for appearances. He cocks both barrels and steps out, right? And I love this little, like you actually see that in his performance, right? He's prepared to fake. We know the gun doesn't work, right? Yeah. And it just means that what came a coincidence is now something that got him out of trouble, which is that we didn't want to see him carrying something, is now a thing that we know could potentially backfire, literally backfire.
But just going back to like you say it's a coincidence, you say it's Deus Ex Machina, it has let the audience off the hook of seeing Max blow a guy's hand off, but the coincidence is working against him. So it's not a coincidence that's working in his favor, which is something we looked at in our coincidences episode. But also the fact that it's backfiring probably because it's loaded up with sand feels very well seated, given that he's just woken up in a pile of sand and there's just sand everywhere.
Yeah, and the war rig is similarly backfiring because it's loaded up with sand. We go in on Furiosa banging sand out of the muffler. That
is true. That is very true. And then he comes around the corner, and here in this carcinogenic world of mutilations, lumps, and half-lives, think about like great fun writing. Stand 5 flawless, luminescent young women. They are in every way the fairest creatures in the wasteland. They are frantically washing burning dust from their bodies. So that's the image I think I showed earlier. That's the black and white, which makes me think, right? And you get that moment here. And what is cool, and this is again how you translate visual ideas to screen, and why I think writers should feel like they can write the tone, is you can translate it. I mean, this is George Miller, who's one of the greatest directors alive. But look, they actually do a pull focus. They do this kind of deliberately slightly soft focus. It misses the rack, and then it focuses on them. We're definitely in his point of view, and it makes us go, wow, right? Yep. And then
it's another. I mean, I don't know about, again, you guys, but it's another one of those kind of wildly humorous beats, because we as an audience, we've been trained to somewhat expect this moment. They're just beautiful women in the Oasis. Amazing. But because, George Miller is George Miller and the film is what it is, he's immediately going to turn it. And it's going to become not about the male gaze and not about the pornography of the moment. It's a wonderful cheat of the audience's expectations and then actually improving upon them as the scene continues.
Yeah. And so to get Nux's attention, this is what they see in the script. He drops Nux to the ground to get their attention. George is writing motivation in, or George or Nico or Brendan, whoever wrote the words on the page, but they're writing the character motivation in. They could have just written he drops Nux, but they found it necessary, and I think it is helpful to write character motivation, because that's not something that the boards can show what happens and illustrate it, but they can't communicate intention in the same way that Tom Hardy can do that with his eyes, and a cut, like
the line that you had before about him saying things are looking up. That is a pure character motivation performance beat piece of writing that's really well done.
Yeah, exactly. Some of this action is different because the order of the action, the idea of the chastity belts, because it was the Praetorian cutting it off. So he now pulls out the gun, and then we're kind of getting into a little bit of the next stage. There's the chastity belt beat. Note what's really important visual storytelling, this close-up, right? Yeah. Look at how much story you're getting from that prop. You're getting the Immortan branding, the property, the teeth on that thing, right? Massive.
And that's something that if we didn't have a storyboard in the script, they would have to spend a good 2 or 3 lines describing to have the same emotional impact on the page.
Yeah, just describe it as a medieval chastity belt. Here's a picture. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to get
you're
back
just
to the
like-
visual storytelling, the show not tell thing, this supplements an enormous amount of information you've already seen about where we are, what the world is like. It sets up a lot of information about what we're about to learn about the wives, why they're running, what their relationship is with him. It's one shot. And then we're going to see it one more time when the dag comes back to kick it before she runs after the war rig, right? So that's 2 shots of this thing, but it's totally based in character and it's perfect visual exposition. Nobody has to say a word about it. It tells you everything you need to know.
Exactly.
And I love something that I only got in the last watch is it felt so believable to these characters that they are spending time removing these chastity belts. And
Yes.
what it does is it actually reinforces how much it means to Max to get his own face mask.
Yeah, it connects him to them. And it is interesting that the first thing that these characters want to do as soon as they have a breath is get that goddamn thing off their body. And it's the same thing with him, right? Like, what thing does Furiosa say that gets Max to finally decide to let her in the rig? Do you want that thing off your face?
Yeah,
it's not, this guy's going to kill you. It's not, you're in serious trouble. It's, do you want that thing off your face?
Yeah, that's excellent observation. I hadn't made that connection, but it is. It's about being trapped. There's actually more dialogue in this script than there is in the film, which is interesting, which comes to how strong the visual storytelling has worked, right? So this is essentially leads to the confrontation they get. Is it the dag or Split? I can't, like, all the characters are named as archetypes. I think she's Splendid, right?
Splendid is the pregnant one. The dag is the loopy one.
Speaking of, we definitely see that she might be pregnant, but just in case you missed it, and it doesn't feel like a gratuitous shot in terms of visual storytelling. It's not about showing off her body. What I mean by gratuitous, it doesn't feel like an insert. It is definitely like just that little pan off to find the belly and then back up and around to find Max. Look at how good that is. Like, it tells you, just in case you missed it, she is pregnant. And I love that the soaked clothes kind of really reinforce it. It's not cancer, by the way. You know, it's not Happy and Larry. It's not big.
God knows I'm a heterosexual male, so maybe I shouldn't comment, but I don't read this as sexualizing or gratuitous in any way. I read this as Miller very respectfully doting on what is ultimately an extremely important aspect of what she's about to do and why she's doing it. You know, because she's going to use her pregnant body to shield the others about 7 minutes from now. You know, like that's a very significant moment. That's her apotheosis as a character. She obviously gets killed very shortly thereafter. But yeah, I think that sequence is in a movie that can be so unsensual because it's an action film that's set in the desert, etc. This is a nice way to be like, no, these are still sensual creatures. These are human beings. They're not just machinery and dust.
No. Yes. They're organic.
They're
something
organic.
There wasn't something, this is not something in the boards, but I thought was very clever. They got Nux getting washed with the water. So they're building the threat of when will Nux wake up? Just look at that little rock of the head. So it becomes a ticking time bomb. When will Nux wake up?
Yeah.
Right? That's not something that's in the boards that we've got. Right? So who knows when they found that? It could have been as they're shooting it. All right. Visual storytelling. I might as well play it. It's like 30 seconds. So it's obviously this whole idea of like, cut the chains. He's not saying a word. This is a character who isn't, this is the advantage of having a character that doesn't speak that much.
Yeah.
Right. He's gonna try and use gestures, right? It's like he's wearing a mask. As if you don't know, Matt, Melbourne, Victoria is compulsory face masks now if you leave the house. So we're all
even outside. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Here in Toronto, it's compulsory indoors. It's not compulsory outdoors yet.
Yeah. It's when you leave the house.
Okay. But this, I mean, speaking of staging, this is a great example of staging in 2 directions, right? Because we have the obvious threat, which is Furiosa's in the frame. We know she doesn't like this. And then we have the we don't know about it yet threat, which is that directly 180 degrees behind us is Immortan Joe's convoy. And the dag, because she's facing us, is going to see that. And that's going to cause Max to take his sight off Furiosa for half a second. And that's all Furiosa is going to need to close that distance right across the axis of action and land right on Max. You know, it's a beautiful,
it is beautiful. I was going to say, like, that observation about Furiosa, because as much as we're talking about this film about center framing, it's still making you, because of the lines, look at that little gun, like that line right there in the composition from the gun to Furiosa, right?
Yeah.
So we still see her, even though the dag grabs our eye. Is it the dag or is it capable? I'm not sure.
No, that's the dag.
It still makes sure that we notice Furiosa and the contrasting colors. The others kind of blend in with their environments a little bit, and they might have actually hazed them up to make sure that we notice Furiosa looking fucking pissed off. And also carefully hiding the arm so they don't have to CG in the CG out.
Yeah.
They save themselves thousands of dollars on that shot just by obscuring it.
Definitely.
Just shuffle a little bit to your left. We don't want to do VFX on this shot.
But it is also drawing our eye. It's making you go, like, look for her, like, because you're struggling to see her. It's making you go, oh, where is she? Where's she going? Like, when's she going to come out?
Mm-hmm. Oh no, it's still there. I was wrong. They've done it at the head of the shot. Anyway, it just felt like one of those decisions where they're like, can we stage it in such a way to save us money? Oh man, that hair would have been a nightmare. Rotoing that. Okay, cool. And then we get into now we're building in the threat, the ticking clock. So we got Nux and we got the ticking clock. I mean, this is great. I mean, you know, that's why I wanted to do this scene. There was so much in this scene that is just like, this is excellent storytelling and the tension. Like there's no we call it the fight scene. There's no fighting that's happened. It's just a really tense sequence.
Yeah.
Her struggling
There it
and
is.
like
Right there. He's taking it. He literally, you see his eyes move. He takes his head left in like a half a second and she's already moving. And again, frames within frames, George finds her between their two bodies.
Yeah. And we know to look for her because we've cut to her. We've got him glancing down there. Ow. And then it's a reveal, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's center frame as well.
There it is. Boom.
Yeah.
And she's already out.
Oh, God.
Yeah. It's just flawless staging. And again, using that line of action between her and them and the convoy.
And the camera.
And the camera. Because the audience is generally looking at us from the direction of the convoy at the action. So we're basically, a lot of the line of action is going straight through the camera in a lot of cases.
Yeah. So good. All right. So that happens. And then what happens is it's a very clever shot, which is not in the boards, right? So you can see these boards here. You go, oofed. Fool, underestimated them. I love that. Before she knows that she has the gun in his chest, they've found a cutaway. Again, it seems like one of the revisions they did is to keep the threats of Nux. So he gets pulled forward, but cleverly it's sympathetic to and the doors in frame as well, because that becomes a device. So it bonds him, literally bonds him to Mad Max, right? Yep. And one of the things that I found really interesting about watching what's going on is there's an actor's exercise where you get elastic. So if you're rehearsing a scene, you actually get elastic of different tightnesses between two actors and you get them to run the scene. So they can feel like if they're getting pulled together, like it forces them together, but you're like, you two do not want to be together, but there's a limitation to it. And it reminds me a lot of that doing the chain thing. Because Nico, who's the one of the co-writers, is a dramaturg, and it wouldn't surprise me if they did that kind of exercise with the actors. Right. Okay, cool. This is the gun, and then this is the pay. Oh wait, has she pulled the gun in yet? Did I skip that?
No, not yet. She's still trying to use the shotgun because she doesn't know it doesn't work.
Okay, cool. So she grabs it. Yeah, here we go. Click, click. If the gun was working, he'd be dead by now. Yeah, there we go. That's the cool little moment. And we get that in a close-up, and he knows it. So we got the payoff. And you just get that reaction shot of her. So good, right? And then they do the chains. It's becoming an element. They're becoming involved, the brides, right? And they're pulling him back. I like how they're fighting over the gun, even if it doesn't work, right? And you get that great shot of Max. But this is a pivot. And there's a couple of what's called the pivot, which is essentially it's a shot because it's a single, allows you to kind of play with screen direction, you know? So it kind of lets us reestablish screen direction a little bit because we're coming around. He's flipped sides and now we're facing towards the convoy, right? And there's some interesting, and look at the detail. That's why I'm playing this at quarter speed. I didn't even pick up the fact on the watch that she throws them. Look at that. And throws them
the range, and then the bolt cutters.
Yeah. Boom. And then Nux is activated and gun out. Just look, I'm just talking through the amazing stunt choreography because it is just awesome, right? And how like the fierceness of the fighting. But here, this is why I showed it. there's a continuity error here.
A
And you
cheat.
don't
Yeah.
get it's a
Yeah.
cheat because she's in between. Nux is to the right,
Mm.
Max is to the left.
And they're parallel to the war rig, and here they're perpendicular to it.
Yeah. But it's the war rig that makes it all work, right? Like you're in such an abstract space. You just have this one anchor object, which is the war rig. So you can get away with a lot of that because the general understanding of the space is maintained by the position of the big truck. I think the specifics just don't read because it's so fast.
Yeah. The speed is what gets you away.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it was only when I was going through this. But what they've done, and this is an editing thing, not a screenwriting thing. This is another pivot on her. Because by keeping her center frame and coming around there, they can reestablish geography when they go to the next shot, which is what we'll see. Sorry, I'm just
Draft Zero, an editing podcast.
We've been wanting to do a take zero on screen directing for a while. So this is like a taster of what I would love to do. All right, obviously I'm playing that at double speed, but you said Anna was laughing at the inclusion of the door.
And for the record, my wife is not someone who has a dark sense of humor or enjoys violence in movies or anything like that. But the use of Nux and the door just had her giggling in this.
Yeah, it's so good. But it's a setup. That setup becomes a payoff, and they're using it. It's a really clever way to do the fight, right? But now things have shifted, right?
Is that in the storyboards and scripts?
No, that's why I'm not showing it. All this stuff, basically Nux tackles. She goes for the gun and Nux tackles her. That's in the boards that we've got. So this is an addition. And obviously it's part of that idea of them just using everything that's available. And it's a really good reference, I think, for fight scenes. That idea of the characters just grab what's nearby and they can create so much energy. There's that, it reminds me of that great moment in, was it Born... The second one? I can't remember the second Born.
Supremacy.
Born second. Where he uses the newspaper, right? Like grabs up that magazine or the newspaper and punches up and whacks the guy. Yeah. Same kind of idea. And it just makes it, I don't know, there's just something that's really cool about it. Again, Nux is dragged, but we know the tempo's slowed down and we know Nux, look at that, he's awake now. I love the way that it connects the two characters. Their fates are intertwined, look at that. Right. It's the eyes all lined up. They possibly reposition that stuff. And then here we are. She's going for the gun. And I love this bit. Them cooperating. That's really important because this actually says something about Nux. It's a character moment for Nux. In the end, he just wants to help people. Right?
Yeah.
I think.
I do feel like Nux at this point, he's still like that one thing that will get me into Valhalla is me getting these women back to Immortan Joe. So like his character motivation is a no doubt here.
I also think it hasn't even occurred to him yet that Max would be trying to get away from him. Like I think he's dehumanized Max to such an extent as his blood bag that he's like, of course we're on the same side. Right? Like he was unconscious for the part where Max tried to blow his hand off. So he has no idea that Max is trying to get out of this.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, I said, yes, Chaz wrote it 10 minutes my ass. But I said, if you stopped interrupting me, it was 10 minutes of video that I timed me talking over.
Interrupted you. I've gotten snacks and had a pee, man.
All right. Come on, this is good.
This is so good. It's just fun to watch.
It is. And you can see the boards, like that shot, over here, that is straight in the film, right? And then all this stuff, them pulling her away from the gun. Okay, and then boom, down, get the gun. That's an interesting flash cut again. So we see a few of them. And there's I'm just going to observe the editing here. Look what happens. There's a double cut. We see that?
Yeah.
Then it actually, look at that. There's this weird jump cut. After that, they repeat the action. I put that in there because for me, as an editor and a director, I'm like, I should try that. That's a really odd choice, but obviously it makes the jump cut work. But what's interesting is I think in terms of the backstory of the character, he's done something that has led people to be hurt. It's not that his wife and child were killed. He went to help someone and shit went bad. That's my interpretation of all these flash.
Yeah, that's my interpretation as well. I don't think it's ever been clearly defined, but yeah, that's what I think this kid represents. It's really weird to think that his son just became a daughter. So let's go with it's somebody new.
Yeah, it's people who tried to help and he's ended up dead, so he's better off being by himself. Anyway, it all works with her kind of pushing him up against the gun, gets it. And I just love this moment. I'm going to play it. The center framing of how standby props or whoever got that to land so perfectly. It's the kind of thing that Fincher would have done digitally, like he did with the mobile phone in Panic Room, to make it land perfectly. And they somehow did it for real. Who knows? Cool. This is great. It's all in the boards. That's why I fast forward through it. This is this character moment here. Again, this teamwork stuff. Rolling. This is all cool. In the script, she grabs the chastity belt. And in the boards, she grabs the chastity belt and whacks him with the chastity belt, not the hose. Right. But fluids, this. Nux sliding in. Hey, here you go.
Here's the ammo. And then the best gun loading moment maybe ever. Just gonna slam it into your hand and then fire off 3 rounds.
Good. And that kind of ends the scene. And then there's the coda on the fight scene, which I'm going to talk about briefly because it's in the script, which is effectively something that they've made less obvious in the film than in the script. When the Splendid goes to the war rig, right? In the script, no warning shot, just shoots the girl in the leg, in the fleshy part around the calf, enough to make her stop. But damn her, she keeps going as gutsy as you please. She's daring him to shoot again, right? In this, it feels like they made it feel more like an accident. That's my interpretation of it. Like he's fired around her.
And it plays much more as not deliberate.
Yeah, like a warning shot that went wrong.
Yeah.
And it seems much more of a nick than like hitting her in the fleshy part of the calf.
Yeah. And then we've got this little dialogue moment, which is the script, blah, 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 something about, everything hurts out here, which is a great reveal because it's about the fact that these girls have not really had to survive outside, and that's why they need to listen to her. They're capable. And then we've got this little shot here, which is what you were talking about.
Yeah.
And that's the button on the chastity belt. And then we lead to what is now the new chapter. But that is kind of the whole fight scene. And if you think about it, what it was, his obstacle was to get unchained from Nux. His obstacle was the chain on Nux, and he wanted to get out of there. And effectively, that whole sequence is about him getting the thing off the back of his neck, disconnected from Nux, and then getting the war rig. And it says a lot about his character. He does not care about the girls. He's obviously got room. And by the way, the little observation, I didn't know this. I only read this because of the Art of Fury raid. The ghost arm on the side of the war rig, that's to represent Furiosa's missing arm.
Yeah.
It's hers.
Yeah.
She got the decal done. Again, it's all those little details, which you can write in that make it feel like a lived in world. Anyway, there endeth my
it was
breakdown of that fight. Thanks. Thanks for joining in, everyone.
I think
no, it's good because I don't think that fight gets enough discussion, right? It's very easy to talk about the first car chase and obviously the final car chase. Those are kind of signature moments, but we don't talk enough about that. There's also a really good, like Raiders of the Lost Ark level good fist fight in the middle of this movie.
Yeah.
I like how that's is that the top? Is that like the
Indy versus the German mechanic under the flying wing is pretty goddamn good.
Yeah. 100%. That's the moment I was thinking of as well.
Yeah.
But that, as much as I'm ragging on you for spending so long, it is glorious just watching that in slow motion. If that's all we've done is just sit back and push play on Mad Max in slow motion, that would be, 6 hours well spent. But what it does is it sets up something that is actually going to be really useful, I think, for all screenwriters, because so often a key problem that we have in a script is we've got 2 characters that start out hating each other that we need to get to work together. And if that's a plot problem, and then you've got perhaps the additional character problem of we need to get them to like each other, trust each other, love each other. And this is not just a Mad Max problem. This is like how rom-coms work, buddy cop movies, sorry. Any odd couple movie. The fact that we've got a description of an odd couple movie is exactly like Mad Max you could describe as an odd couple movie.
Yeah.
So a couple. I actually think, because I think it builds into it, but what's interesting about that fight scene, thinking about it now, is all those beats that will kind of like the chain, the way he loads the gun, all that stuff is character beats that the writer can write in. The kind of rumble and tumble of like who punches who, and they roll over and all that stuff. You don't have to write that detail in, but the kind of nuts sliding and giving him the whatever it is, the magazine, all that stuff of those character beats you can write in. those characters cooperating and being at odds and then cooperating, the chain being pulled together, all that stuff in some ways is a microcosm of what you need to do. But I know this thing, and I think it was a great observation. I'm just going to let you guys talk about this one now. How does Max and Furiosa, how do they fall in love? This is basically their meet cute, right?
Yeah, exactly. And what they've done is establish a meet cute of two people, both of whom have pressed the shotgun, pulled the shotgun trigger, right? We know that both of these people will not hesitate, not even blink about blowing limbs or heads off people.
Yep.
Each other,
And
in fact.
What's interesting about the first half of their relationship is it really is not about them learning to trust each other. It's about there are moments that are given to them by the script, by the plot, I mean, by the external circumstances that force their individual goals to align.
Yeah.
Right? Max has a set of goals, Furiosa has a set of goals, and most of what brings them together in the first 5 or 6 beats that we've outlined is their goals actually match up.
Yeah.
Just accidentally, you know? And then they learn to trust each other. But like, I think if, you know, the stuff in the canyon wouldn't happen if they were not equally invested in, we got to get the hell away from this crazy guy in the mask. Like, they don't care why each of them is doing it. They just need to both go. So their goals are aligned.
And I've written scripts that have this problem, right? The two people that loathe each other and people just don't buy them starting to work together, right? I mean, frankly, Stu and I are somewhat working on this problem. It's not
in our relationship or on
Jesus. Yeah, I was about to say, are you talking about your relationship? That's amazing.
So first of all, 100%, but also in the project.
I like how, like, by the way, nice beanie to hide your isolation photo, Chaz.
Well, it was people were getting too distracted by it from the previous.
Good.
You can wear it, no shame. It's pretty good.
Yeah, man, I think you look great.
Thank you. But so Stu and I are dealing with this right now in that the character journey is represented in this relationship of two characters in our script, and we had trouble tracking that. Like, that is the key thing that our first readers have responded to. So what amazes me about this piece of storytelling is that they get two characters who loathe each other, who see each other as mortal threats, and with almost entirely through action beats. None of it is sit down and talk about our backstory and find things that we have in common. There's maybe 3 lines of very potent dialogue in the whole journey, but nearly all of it is, as you say, is decisions, like dramatizable binary decisions. Yeah. And it's just such a, and I just want to talk through the beats that they've done, because they also make it work in such quick time as well. Mm-hmm. So we've had the fight.
So we need to, so your observation, like, the writer's problem is they need to get to this point. And this is how I think it's screwed up. They need to get this point when Max goes to Furiosa, because Furiosa's, that scene ends with Furiosa saying to the brides, you just listen to me, right? She is in control. She is driving anything. She's got a plan, right? Yeah. That when her plan, she has, and the low point is her low point, not Max's low point.
Oh, yeah.
Her low point where she's on the sand, strips it, and that's great visual storytelling. I just didn't pull it out. That shot where she like takes her thing off and falls in the sand. I mean, that just kills you. And it's one of the few times they break the center line. Mel, because you asked, I watched. We're with center, but they cut to a wider shot, and it's actually empty in the middle, and we have to scan the frame a little bit, and they slow it down to allow that. Max has to be able to go to her and go, I think we should go back to the Citadel and just race past everyone, which is a fucking batshit insane idea. And she needs to be like, okay. Right? Yeah. So that's the story moment that they have to do the work to get to, so the audience understands why that decision happens.
And it's not just that story beat, it's also following that is Max as a character who's someone who says in opening VO, I've been reduced to a single instinct to survive, to actually choose at several points along this journey to do things that are counter to his own survival.
Yeah.
He's living for these women. So that's like his journey. So it's like, these are both plot and character. This relationship and how it moves Max has both plot and character payoffs. And it's really essential to make the whole thing work. So,
and he says that his sole instinct is to survive, but the reality is we learn as the movie unfolds with the flashbacks to the little girl being killed and the fact that she's haunting him. His actual motivation is to be redeemed for whatever this failure is that he believes that he has. So he says, if we go back, he says, it'll be a hard day. He's like, look, I know we might not make it. I know this is a crazy plan, but if we do, we might both earn this thing we both actually need, which is redemption. Right. So they've aligned, they begin because they're aligned, because they're both very pragmatic characters. They have specific goals, and they can recognize that even though they don't like each other, they both need to get where they need to go. But they end aligned because they both want to make up for some, in both cases, unknown, ungodly sin in their past.
Yeah. So, all right. The first, we've seen the fight. The second beat is the negotiation between Max and Furiosa to get the women onto the rig, because Furiosa has a kill switch on the rig. Max can't drive it without her. He instantly agrees to take Furiosa on board so that they can drive away. But as soon as Furiosa says, and the women, Max is like, no, okay, we're going to sit here and we're going to wait and we're going to die all together. I would rather die all together than have these liabilities in the truck with me that people are chasing. Right? It's again all about survival. And like we've said before, the thing that gets them all in is her offering to get the mask off his face.
Yeah.
Once he's in the rig, and in me discussing these beats, I'm gonna actually spend a lot more time talking about the early ones, because there's just so many more of them in the first 7 minutes, and it goes towards this the storytellers have made us buy these key character beats so quickly. So he gets in, he's working with the chisel to get the mask off his face, and he's finding all her hidden weapons around the cab. And it's a huge number. It's like 20 weapons that he finds hidden everywhere. And he's got the gun on her or on the brides at all times. So very well established. Oh, we've lost you again.
Lost him again.
Hopefully, I'm going to call him just in case
he started talking. Maybe that's what happens. He launches into a monologue and drops his camera.
Yeah, it's just did it again.
Yeah. Okay. Just checking you knew.
Yeah.
See you soon.
It's weird. Wait.
So I'm going to keep going because he's unnecessary for me to rant.
Absolutely.
So they're in the cab. He's got the gun on them. He's a threat, but he needs her. So the plot is forcing them to work together. The first choice that he has where things change is they're approaching the canyon. They've got the three war parties converging on them, and the trailer starts dragging, right? And that's because Nux has disabled it. And Furiosa says, I will go and check on the trailer. You keep driving. That would put Max. I mean, it's hard to know why he makes this decision. I wonder, actually, it's interesting. Stu, would you mind scrolling through the script for this moment just to see if they write in what his character motivation was?
This is what I was trying to do before Zoom decided I was already in this meeting and I didn't need to be in this meeting. So I'm a little bit, I'll try. I'm just a little bit traumatized after being kicked out twice. I feel I'm abandoned.
Okay. I'm going to share it because I found it.
Oh, thanks.
So can you guys see it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Dunno, feels like I'm dragging the fuel pod. She turns to him, take the wheel. Tempting, but why trust her? He says, you say, I'll go. So the point is he doesn't actually know whether to trust her, like letting her leave his sight, or for him, what she could get up to by him leaving the cab. But either way, him choosing to go and fix the problem actually changes her feelings of him, right? She can trust him because he is working for the good of the endeavor.
But what's important to show that he doesn't fully trust her, right, is he takes the weapons with them, which is a beat that is echoed when he returns with weapons from blowing up the tank vehicle thing, right?
Yep.
It's a deliberate mirror. And this is what I mean. This is like image systems. This is visual storytelling. In this thing, he takes the bag, scoops it up, puts it on the top. So we know that even though he's volunteering to do that, he doesn't trust them. And when he turns back with guns and starts handing them out, we know he's trusts them. Again, it doesn't have to be done with dialogue. And it's very classic dramatist.
Dramaturgy? I don't know.
Yeah, dramaturgy. Let's call it
so
that.
Then minutes later, she's in the canyon doing the deal with whoever the canyon tribe are. And the idea is she was supposed to come alone. So the brides are hiding. Max is hiding in the truck. And that her element of surprise is that Max can drive the truck. So the really big important beat is that she has decided for the good of the endeavor. Again, it's for the plot. It's pure character motivations, but Max going and fixing the trailer and defeating Nux and giving the weapons leads her to tell him the kill switches. She, at that point, gives up all of her usefulness to Max. Max could, at that point, flick all the kill switches, carry on, kill all the brides, carry on driving, and have the war rig and be by himself acting fully in survival, right?
Yeah. And I think in both cases, with Max going to check on the fuel pod and with Furiosa making that decision, it's pure pragmatic calculation on both their parts. The risk of doing it is less than the risk of not doing it.
Yeah.
So they're just both willing to make that choice. Even they may not feel 100% about it, but they're like, if I feel 70% about it, I'm going to do it. And you see both of them go through that and just do what they have to do.
Yeah. From there until the swamp, there's a whole lot of wonderful, amazing action set pieces with Immortan Joe. Splendid has her moment. Nux has his moment of...
Or doesn't have his motive.
Yeah.
Mediocre. Yeah.
So the film stops tracking Furiosa and Max's relationship until the swamp, where Max just wanders off to go and deal with the bullet farm guy. And it's got that amazing line where she's like, you know, what do we do when the engines are cool and if you're not back? And he's just so deadpan, you carry on.
Keep going. Yeah.
And that is, again, it feels so of Max's character, but it's such a huge shift of, this is no longer about my survival. Yeah. This is in fact about your survival has become more important than mine. Yeah. And so that's one of the few moments that actually happens in dialogue. But again, it is a dramatizable choice. They could have had them actually driving off and then him sprinting out of the darkness, for example. The next beat that happens before the final turnaround and that great, amazing car chase back towards the Citadel is that when they find the Vuvolini, they find that there's no good place. Their plan is to drive across the salt, but she offers him a bike and the chance to come with him, but the bike is not contingent on him coming with them.
Yeah, you earned a bike. You get a bike whether you come with us or not. Yeah.
And that is, again, you know, it's the thanks, it's the trust, it's the payment, and it's a choice. And then all Max does with that bike is use it to chase them down to say, you know, this is where we should be going. We should turn around and head back to the Citadel. And then finally, as we've discussed a few times already, is him offering his own blood as a blood bag to Furiosa and him telling her his name at that same point.
Mm-hmm.
I just want
to... Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, bookends. Yeah, you're ending on a really beautiful point, and I was about to...
I was going to say it bookends their entire relationship because it bookends his journey because of the blood, obviously, which is both the beginning and the end of the film. It just also bookends their relationship because it's basically the first thing she asks him, like, what do I call you? And his response says a lot because he says, does it matter? Which is this magnificently nihilistic, deadpan, nothing fucking matters, so who cares moment. And then at the end, he claims his name and he's willing to share it with her because
they exchange bodily fluids.
So they exchange bodily fluids. Yeah, getting back
in
to
the back of a car.
Him giving his name to her is as much him acknowledging his own humanity.
Yeah,
I have a name. I have redeemed myself enough that I'm prepared to say I have a name, that I am a person.
That's right.
And it's weird. I feel myself tearing up more talking about it than I do in the actual moment when I'm watching it in the film, because of like how potent all the background stuff, all the subtext to these very simple, very binary choice beats are. But we've discussed all of their relationship, and I think I've got maybe 8 beats written here, but that's as simple as it can be to get two mortal enemies to change their complete worldview to help each other survive.
Yeah. And to the point where, as an audience, you know, if they announce tomorrow that there's going to be a Furiosa and Max follow-up, you know, another adventure with these two, we'd all be there in a heartbeat because this relationship's been kind of perfectly crafted as she that's what, you know, the most amazing thing about all this, not just because I like to throw it in the face of the men's rights activists, but she really did become as iconic a part of this franchise as Max himself, and she did it in one movie.
My character in Ghost Recon Breakpoint he's got short blonde hair and black face paint across like
Nice.
that. I basically modeled him Furiosa to the like. It says something that character is so iconic because Mad Max has obviously influenced so many video games, like obviously the Fallout series. But then now Furiosa, just that is so iconic that it's now a cosmetic.
Yeah,
Well, it's just a weird like. Yeah,
I mean, going back to our world building discussion, they take a beat of that when the sandstorm and the water has washed off that grease for us to show us what it was. It could have been a tattoo, but it's the grease from her car. It's part of her, again, it's a little culture beat that
she puts on her face, but her putting on her face in that is yes. I do want to two observations, and I'm going to get juvenile, but I did take a photo of this. Right, because I was making the joke about the bodily fluids at the back of the Cadillac.
Yeah.
The Cadillacs are mounted one on top of the other. This is the Giga Horse. This is Immortan Joe's vehicle. The Cadillacs are mounted on top of one another. Colin Gibson, who's the production designer, says, and any resemblance to a sex act, much on the Immortan mind, is intended. A lot of the muscle car stuff is about cock, and this is indeed about cock and copulation. So they're meant to look like they're humping at high speed. So
at least they're honest about it.
Like, this is the thing. You can write that into the script. You can literally describe his vehicle is like, I took the
copulating at high speed.
It's designed to look like they're copulating high speed. The other one I want to come back to is our observation about mediocre. And we're joking about it, right? Because that whole, I didn't pick up, only on this watch do I pick up that other people say that earlier. The couple of the War Boys saw it when someone tries something and then they die, right? And obviously it's something to do with the religion, which is, I just thought the mediocre was hilarious. The first
I think it's whether you get into Valhalla or not is the idea.
It's a really important part of Nux's journey because there's this whole thing about everything that Immortan Joe's promising him when he's about to jump on I know the secret trap and I can get this. And he's like, I will personally await you at Valhalla. And then he does the thing and then it just fucks up completely in front of his demigod. And so he went from like, oh my God, Immortan Joe, like early on the setup is Immortan Joe looked at me. No, he didn't. He didn't look at you. He was just glancing in your direction, right? So how rare having interaction with Immortan Joe is. And so how significant it is for that character that he's basically, his God is like, oh, I will personally wait on you if you do this thing. And then he fucks it up. And that is super important. How quickly Nux turns against Immortan Joe. It happens in a scene with Riley Keough. And look, I'd probably change religions for
We all would. Yeah. But again, to get back to the visual and the kind of the mythic of it, what is it that trips Nux? It's his chain, right? Like he's engaging in this act of servitude to Immortan Joe, but the thing he trips on is his chain. His bondage literally causes him to fail. Like little beats like that, I'm like, George, very good. very good.
That's great. I didn't even notice that.
Yeah.
But also his self-sacrifice at the end, he says to Riley Keough, witness me. He hasn't given up on the religion. He's changed his deity.
Yeah, exactly. And he still recognizes that there is something important in the heart of what Joe has built as like a false godhood, which is that idea that everyone wants to be seen. Everyone wants to be witnessed. Everyone wants someone to see them for who they really are. That's why Max can volunteer his name for Furiosa a few minutes later. So yeah, when Nux says "witness me" at the end, it's a very earned moment of recalibrating what he said earlier.
To me, it's actually more powerful than Max saying his name.
For me as well, but yeah.
Yeah, I generally get teary when Nux sacrifices himself because he's got the biggest journey. Like he's got a bigger journey than Max. Like he's gone from being like this violent, and he still is, but he is willing to sacrifice himself to save these people. Like, so, I mean, it's obviously something that is in his mindset. Like, as you say, he's trained to be effectively a kamikaze driver, but there's still something in that he's willing to die for these people and realizes that their cause is just in a way that Immortan Joe's wasn't. Like, he's becoming, as you say, tripped up by his own bondage. He's beginning to see the promise, the hope. He learns what hope is, I guess.
Yeah,
I don't
exactly.
think Immortan Joe offers hope. I mean, that's the whole
point.
He
definitely doesn't. Immortan Joe has basically weaponized human life, and Nux finds hope. Nux's character arc is actually the most Campbellian of any of them, right? He is on a classic romantic hero's journey. He literally leaves home, gets into all kinds of adventures, meets and woos maiden fair, returns home with the life-changing formula. He doesn't make it all the way. He has to die to do it. But like, if you go through the Campbell beats, Nux basically does all of them.
Him and Larry and Barry. We can't forget.
Well, of course,
Larry.
yes. Larry and Barry bring him along. Yeah.
Imagine if someone you would know whether
Yeah.
or not they Larry and Barry action figures.
I wish. There's not even a good Nux action figure. It drives me crazy. You know, like I'm a big action figure guy. It's like, oh, come on, man. We're the toys.
But that actually, I should do that for New Year's. Like not New Year's, Halloween. Just get little ping pong boards and paint them on and put little smiley faces, and that's my entire costume.
That's not bad. See, I would take it too far. I would actually need to be like, you know, stripped to the waist and painted all white and bald, and that's too much. No one wants to see that.
Well, you know, if we're still all in lockdown, then no one will.
Great point. You know what? If there's any Halloween, this is the one to experiment with.
Cool. I actually think we're kind of running on time. Is there any other?
It's a miracle.
This is weird. It's really
stray
weird.
stray observations that people like lessons. But you've written a whole bunch of essays, and we've kept really focused. But if you like, you know, you just throwing in these little like bits of wisdom, like those, like the bondage thing keeping him back. Is there any other kind of examples of visual storytelling like that? Because that's something that a writer can write in that you can look through on a. Okay, so I think this is kind of like a theme for, you know, lessons from Mad Max, because Chaz and I want to do a whole episode on setup, payoffs, and reversals. And part of the idea is that, you know, a pass of a script is when you add something and then you go and weave in the setup, right? That you sit there and go, oh, we need the club foot. Well, what if this character's got a club, you know, a toxic, mutant, cancerous foot? Oh, well, let's go and add in this beat, right? There's those kinds, like, for lack of a better word, the poetic justice, the poetic systems of like chipping on the train. Is there any of those other kind of visual systems that you can sit there and go, this is good visual storytelling that they've kind of then reverse engineered into the script? You know, it could be that the Nightbog is one of those, the Crows are one of those. I don't know. I mean, obviously we're not part of the process here, so we can't speak to the process, but we can kind of extrapolate some of what it does.
No, but I mean, I think the one other thing is, you know, we've mentioned it with relation to Nux and with relation to Max, like, but there are characters throughout the movie whose bodies are essentially enslaved or used in one way, and that make a choice to use it in another way. Like, again, to go to the moment where Splendid decides, you know, she's been raped by this man, she's carrying his baby, she's trying to escape, and she makes this decision to put that pregnant baby between his gun and her friends. So she is repurposing her own body in that moment to shield her friends and do something that she considers to be of value. You see characters do that throughout. I think it's like, it's a very, I called it an existentialist Western in my book, because it's like, it's very much about, there is no God, there is no Immortan Joe, there's no higher power. The only thing that matters is what you choose to do at any given moment. And you have these characters throughout who are oppressed, who are suppressed, who make the choice to basically take that oppression and use it for good. And it happens over and over and over with most of the main characters. I think that's what unifies all of them. And, you know, I love it. That's why I think I like the movie as much as I do.
Chaz, do you have other stray observations, lessons from?
No, I think, look, I don't know how much of it is a lesson, and more of us just, most of this podcast has just been going, oh my God, look how incredible this film is. And
very much so.
I know people who, you know, friend of the podcast, Julio, on his podcast with Alex, the Contrarians, they often laugh at the love that's given to Mad Max, and they go, this is a perfectly standard action movie. And I'm like, hopefully this 2 hours has shown just how much every frame of this film is so carefully thought out, is so carefully interwoven, does so much more than any other action film.
Yeah, if this is anyone's idea of a standard action movie, I'd like to live in your world. Because that would be, you've seen some great action movies if that's the case.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I think there is something to be, I was speaking to my friend Emma about it, and, you know, she didn't respond to the film as much because the dialogue for her was lacking. She's obviously someone that's a little bit attuned to the dialogue. And it does feel like even the fact that mediocre, look, I understand, like mediocre, part of it feels so out of place, but it's hard to pick what language they should be using for something like Mad Max. But it definitely, the language feels weirdly stylized, but at the same time not stylized. It's very different from like the first Mad Max. And I haven't rewatched the original and Road Warrior for a while, and the third one that shall not be named. I haven't seen that since I was a kid. But it's interesting. It's depending on how the kind of person you are and the kind of watcher you are. If you're someone that connects to characters through dialogue, which is completely legitimate, right? I'm not saying rather than gestures or behavior, this film is going to not work for you in quite the same way. That kind of Max Furiosa relationship isn't going to work. So,
but these are not mutually exclusive. With every one of these beats, they could have had Max and Furiosa both slowly opening up about their past. Like it's just a choice. What to me is impressive is this is so much harder to do without dialogue, and that's why I'm in awe of it from the character relationship perspective.
Yeah,
same.
All right, are we done?
I think we're done.
I think we're done.
I have our Patreon page open for once in preparation. So
wow.
If you guys want more Draft Zero more often, please consider becoming a Patreon. It is because of you guys that we have somehow brought you more Draft Zero more often in the face of a global pandemic. Once again, Matt as a guest also is going to pay for this episode at some point.
It's really weird. Yeah, that's right. Guys, I became a Patreon 2 years ago. I've never looked back. I recommend it to all of your listeners. Please do it.
So that you too might one day become a guest.
Yeah, you're just working your way down the subscriber list.
But special thanks to Uber Patreons, Matteo, Christopher, Sandra, Jack, and Krob. You guys are amazing. And we still have t-shirts. Stu keeps telling me he's working on his extra special t-shirts, but
I think now T Public are doing face masks, so you might be able to do what we could do is just get your Mo as a face mask, so people can have the Princess Bride.
We have very similar facial hair, Stu.
I can't look at that. You got a little bit more there.
I honestly
You're
can't
the one
tell you apart. Between the accents and the facial hair, I have no idea which is which.
That's fair enough. And thanks for coming on the show, Matt. Where can people find more of your excellent writing?
The book.
First of all, it's a pleasure. Second of all, you can find stuff about me at my website, tedrick.com, TEDERICK.com. I'm also Tedrick on Twitter. The book is currently sold out for pre-order, but I have decided to print more copies than was originally intended. So there will be more available around November or December. So keep an eye on my website for how to order that.
You got to get it in time for Christmas.
Yeah, exactly. And guys, I'm just such a huge fan of the work that you do. It was a real pleasure to be here and to talk about this movie. I would have talked about any movie, like Speed,
Star Wars.
Fine, yeah. Oh well, obviously Star Wars, but any movie, honestly.
Duel of Fates. We could do a podcast on Duel of Fates.
We could absolutely talk about that script.
Aren't you on a podcast? Just to finish off.
By the way, yeah. I was on a friend of mine did a table reading of the Duel of the Fates script. I played Poe Dameron, which, by the way, that's a lifelong dream right there. I played Poe Dameron in a Star Wars script.
I like that, lifelong, like from 6 years old.
Yeah, like from 5 years ago. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Where can we find that? Or we'll put it. We'll find it and put a link.
Yeah, it's duelofthefates.ca, but it's worth listening to just because it is a fascinating alternate screenplay for that movie.
Well, I haven't found the time/will to read it, but listening to a live reading, I would probably be much more tempted to do.
Yeah, it's a pretty easy listen, and it's a lot of fun. They got some of the other. I don't speak well of myself, but some of the other actors, the young lady that plays Rey, the young lady that plays Rose is fantastic. It's it's worth.
Wait. Does she have any lines?
She has more lines in the first 4 minutes than she has in The Rise of Skywalker.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
She got a great part too. She's best part of the movie, or the script that almost became a movie.
My heart is breaking for the Star Wars franchise.
I'm assuming there's no back matter questions at this point. I was just trying to linger on to see if anyone was going to throw any listener questions out. We can just. I want to read Duel of Fates. Is it worth reading?
I think it's worth reading. Yeah, like it's by no means perfect. It doesn't solve everything. It fails on Kylo Ren just like Rise of Skywalker does, but it does a better job of being a sequel to the other two films.
Well, to the masterpiece that's Last Jedi.
Yeah, nothing. It can't match The Last Jedi. Nothing could, but it does. intelligently continue the themes of The Last Jedi rather than throwing them under the bus.
My conspiracy, it's not a conspiracy theory. I just wouldn't surprise me if someone like Dark Horse releases the Jewel of Fates in like 10 years as a comic book.
That stuff happens all the time.
Because isn't there some weird, like before there was Empire Strikes Back, there was another Star Wars script sequel that they then made it was like Crystals of something or something. I don't know. There was some
They did a comic of the original draft of Star Wars, which is well worth reading because that is bonkers. They did
with the Bogan side of the Force and everything.
Yeah. And they did a comic of the William Gibson script for Alien 3, which is also worth reading because that is awful.
Yeah, awful. I listened to the audiobook and it was like, yeah, okay, I can see why they didn't make it.
Yeah,
but there's ideas that have like incorporated into Prometheus and Covenant, but
but no, it's not a script. It's not a story. There's nothing there to turn into a movie. Yeah,
right. Interesting. All right, I think we're done then because no one's responded. So if you had said anything, it's too late.
Yeah, you suck.
All right, thanks again. Oh wow, hang on 2:00.
Amazing.
Well, one past 2.
Yeah.
Well, we started 7 minutes late, so we've done under 2 hours.
There you go. Just enough time to roll the credits for Fury Road.
And get us locked out of YouTube.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good way to end. Yeah. Your feed has been suspended. All right, thank you all. Oh, wait, no, I've got to go and turn off I was just going to leave the meeting, but actually...
Just keep live streaming for the rest of the day from an empty office.
I'm going to stop GarageBand.